Starting recording,
Yep.
and let me bring in fireflies just in case. Alrighty. Awesome, man. Well, I just wanted to welcome you to, I think this is episode number 9 of the Waking Warrior podcast. So very excited to have Chris on and really dig into your story. The focus of the podcast is really about talking to as many veterans as possible. All of us have faced some manner of challenge through our military service, through our transition process, any number of things happening to us or that we're going through afterwards, like depression, anxiety, all that sort of thing. So what I want to do is really dig into you and your story, Chris, and take it away, man. Speak for as long as you want, brother. I'll take notes and we'll dig in to anything that
Yeah.
comes up later.
Yeah. Gosh, where to start? So I got out probably like many officers do. Like I got out post company command. And um I I don't think I wanted to get out, but my family situation, my former spouse had just had our son and was battling postpartum. And I was supposed to command another company and go to Afghanistan again, and then all of that changed, and then I got selected for promotion and to go to CGSC and all that stuff, and I was just frustrated and resigned, right? And so I think there were things weighing on me to resign, but I did. And I went down this path of went to a junior military officer hiring firm and had a really great experience, right? Got 2 job offers on the same day. But they were, the one I took was great. It taught me a bunch about business, but it was totally not what I was going to go do. Right? It was like I was not built to go run a district of a pest control company, right? Like that was just there's no reward in that. It was just really boring, right? Um
I had a very similar experience, by the way. I became a value stream manager also through a junior officer military hiring firm. Most boring thing I've ever done in my life.
yeah, and it just so you start right, so you're like, okay, I got a decent job that in society was a decent paying good job, but you go from being a captain with over 8 years of service and BA and all that, and you're like, oh, I'm poor now, but the bank was still willing to give me a mortgage for a big house, right? And so things get that, because you're not used to it. Like, I don't know, I didn't own a home when I was on active duty, and like property tax in the state of Connecticut is really high, and so all of a sudden all this new stuff, overwhelmed. No fulfillment in the job, you know, probably self-medicated a ton, just drinking beers, right? And really just that became the thing, right? Like doing a lot of beer drinking, a lot of just not being super stoked. Um, Went to grad school, remotely with the VA, which was great. And through all that process, got a new job. Much more fulfilling, but still not even at the salary level like that you're at as a captain or like a major or maybe a sergeant like just not where you need to be. um Really stressful, man. um Trying to incorporate all the great stuff from my time leading paratroopers and like being all that stuff. And at a certain point I was just completely overwhelmed, completely like, holy smokes, I'm just working my butt off, not making, not like barely making ends meet, you know, just unhappy. And I was at that point in time I was listening to every business podcast that you could think of, right? And I forget who the guest was, but it was on the Learning Leader show. Um this dude talked about meditation, and he talked about the Headspace app. and I was driving into Hartford, Connecticut, where my office was at the time. And I used to get there, when I say that I was like killing myself, I would get to the office at like 6 o'clock in the morning and be home at like 7 o'clock at night. And this is working for an architecture firm, like it's director of operations and working business development stuff. So I was working 12, 13-hour days. And so and by the way, nobody got to the office till like 8 o'clock in the morning, right? So it's such like just me in this office in Hartford, Connecticut. So I downloaded the Headspace app
Mm.
and I did a 10-minute meditation. And when the guide says, like, now open your eyes, all of that weight that I felt like had sort of gone away. And so that got me super curious. And so I start doing more research. I start dabbling with just different meditation apps, right? And then somebody recommended the book 10% Happier to me
Mm.
by Dan Harris. And I read it and I was just like, oh man. Like I didn't have the drug problem like he had, right? Like he goes through, tells his whole story. But and I say he introduced me to all these people, but he introduces all of these Western Buddhist sort of leaders, really, when you think about it. So these were all folks in the 60s and 70s that went to places like India, Thailand, um, Myanmar, and studied with all these like great Buddhist monks and Buddhist teachers, and then came back and brought sort of what is now, modern mindfulness, which is really, you know, Theravada Buddhist meditation. They
Basically,
brought
yeah.
that here, right? And they built Insight Meditation Society. They built the one on the West Coast, which is going to slip my mind right now. But it's like Jack Kornfield, Joseph Goldstein, Sharon Salzberg. And so I feel like I get introduced to all of them in this first book. And then being a curious learning mindset type person, I started reading all of their stuff. And then as I started reading all of their stuff, I started practicing what they said. And I went from like this 10-minute meditation a day thing to at one point I was sitting for 2 hours a day. Right.
It's intense.
Yeah. Yeah. Did a couple retreats. Like, so all of this stuff is happening. I found a Buddhist teacher. I start working with her. And by the way, she's the teacher that's on Apple Meditation now. Um,
Mm.
super awesome woman that like really helped me a ton. But all that weight, like that meditation took the weight away, got me to see some things. It got me out of a bad marriage. It, I transitioned jobs to one that I'm in now. And I sit there and I think about it. It's like I think that I don't think I would have become a statistic, but I would definitely not be where I'm at if I had not gone down this like Buddhist path that led me to I stopped eating meat for over 5 years. I became a vegetarian as part of my practice and just recently went back to eating just a normal diet. But I also stopped drinking as part of it. Not because I thought I had a problem,
Mm.
but it was part of me living the Buddhist precepts. And I think that doing that has allowed me to sort of become at peace with all the stuff from my service, all the stuff from, you know, just all that life can throw at you, like having that, let's call it a 7-year period. Um, so it's probably 7 years ago that I started going down that journey. And today I don't sit for 2 hours. Today I meditate in random things that I'm doing. Like it's not as deep of a practice, but it slows down that reactionary thing that's inside
Mm.
all of us, right? And it helped for me, that was like the thing that helped me like readjust to not being the dude that used to follow that flag, right? Or that flag would follow. Like not not having this sense of like you're with your brothers in arms or brothers and sisters in arms, and like just a different way to look at things. And um so yeah, so I put a lot of my success that I've had post army probably around having a few good friends and mentors that were there, but finding, a spiritual practice is what I'll call it, that
Hmm.
helped give me some direction, helped me read books like The Four Agreements, helped me like put things in context, like, you know, um like there's some scenarios that happened, like everybody's got it, like when you're in Afghanistan and you know something bad happens, and then your unit does something positive. Like I've struggled with my team's reactions when we had successful offensive strikes, let's put it that way.
Yep.
And like now I do struggle with it, just thinking about how cavalier we were back then, and knowing that back then, after things that had happened, it totally made sense psychologically for the responses that we likely had in those moments. But that's been a thing that like has bothered me, like how cool we were with with extinguishing life, right?
Mm.
And I think that going through all this practice, and I know some people will think I'm, you know, odd for framing it this way, but like I know that's what happens in war, right? As you're doing these things. But as somebody that became a Buddhist and is like thinking about like, protect all life, it's like why, I could sit back and go, okay, so you feel some discomfort with your former self with how you dealt with things. Like that's okay. And I found that I've been able to talk about it with some folks, you know, to just to be human versus where you think about all those videos that came out right when we invaded Iraq. Like I was in military school when the invasion happened. We would watch those videos of us bombing things with like metal music on and everybody getting all excited. And it's like you think back and you're like, man, a lot of people died when we were doing all that. And
Yeah, I think
so
there's. Have you ever read On Combat by Lieutenant Colonel Grossman?
mhm,
Yeah, so I think he, for those that haven't read it, he goes into a really great explanation of how around World War II, the Army figured out that normal humans don't want to kill each other. And so that in order to inculcate this idea of being an effective soldier, you have to think of the enemy as targets and not people. So it's a process of dehumanization. And so I think what you're referring to there is there's this massive inculcation among our soldiers and the officer corps of dehumanizing the enemy. And that has led us to become effective extinguishers of human life. But we have not done any work on how to rehumanize. And so you've got a
yeah,
bunch of these soldiers coming in, thinking of many people as less than. And
mhm,
that is, I think, a huge factor into all these challenges we're facing.
yeah. And it, that's the thing. When I think back on my service, like that's a great way to wrap it up. It's like I'm very proud of everything that I did, and still have this like I knew that that's what we needed to be in that moment, right? Because in that
Mm.
moment it's not a thought exercise, right? In those moments
Yeah.
it's like this is what's happening. And just as an adult dealing with all of that in a healthy way versus a lot of friends of mine will just drink a lot of bourbon, smoke a lot of pot. Um Not that there's anything wrong with either of those two things, but when
But
they're
they can
doing it,
often be used in
yeah,
a very negative way. Yeah.
yeah, right. Like so there's something wrong with it when it's to, you know, turn all those feelings off. and um yeah. And I'll tell you what's funny is I think it's not funny, but I think the first time we spoke, I told you about this. What made me reach out to wanna to do this is I've had this feeling like I haven't done enough, like,
Mm,
for our community. I've been one of those folks that has felt relatively successful post-army, and granted, a lot of things fell into place. I did a lot of good stuff. I was probably pretty lucky, but I've got a pretty good life going. And I had a friend that killed himself a little over a year ago who was a hero. Like
mm.
not like I command a company in the 82nd. I went to Iraq and Afghanistan. This is a dude lost his leg, fought to stay in, deployed with a prosthetic, wrote a book about it. Everybody that went to rope in like 2010 to like my friend was known in the ranger community deeply, and I hadn't talked to him in 18 years maybe, right? I think I went to his wedding when I was at Fort Benning for like I was at the basic course and he was in 3rd Ranger Regiment and he was getting married and we ran into each other at a steakhouse and and I went to his wedding, right? I probably ran into him a few other times. But in the aftermath of his passing, it really hit me like, well, what are you doing to help others, outside of the former platoon leaders of mine being like, hey, sir, can you write me a recommendation? Or, hey, sir, like,
Mm.
I'm really struggling. Can we talk? Like, outside of the people that I totally know and have stayed in touch with, I just felt like there isn't something. And so when you reached out to talk about this, it was just like, okay, this is a thing because I don't think that our stories are all that different from everybody else.
They're not really, but we feel like they are, and we feel like we're the only ones that are going through these anxiety, depression, suicidal tendencies, or substance
Yeah.
abuse, you name it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And but it's also like really hard, I think, to reach out for help
Yep.
because of every stigma that's out there. And then, you know, I joined the American Legion when I first got out, and it was full of Vietnam vets, right? Like, I mean, it might as well be a Vietnam vet
Yeah.
organization at this point, right? But I was at a point where I was, outside of transition stuff, I was pretty good. I didn't have any PTSD, didn't really feel like anything was really affecting me. And every time I saw the dudes from the post, they had this like Vietnam era mentality of overly checking in
Yes. Yeah.
because they didn't. And so this is nothing against it. Like I feel for all of them, but we almost went too far in some of those things. So people like I don't know anybody of my generation that is in the American Legion or the VFW. Like, and I don't know if it's because of that or whatnot, but it's just I live in Connecticut. Yes, there's a veterans community here, but it's not like a big one, right? It's New England.
Yeah. It's almost like this well-meaning overreaction. This like
Yeah.
overly checking in, because like you can't. Medicine is all about the dose, I think. So if I were to start to talk to people about energies and like they'd be like they roll their eyes and like this motherfucker's crazy. Just walk away. And I feel like it's a lot of that in the Legion as well. This like
Yeah.
because they didn't have that checking in on them, they're so eager to make sure that they do, but that doesn't really resonate, especially with somebody that's fresh out of the military. Me putting my
Yeah.
hand on your shoulder, like, do you need a hug? Fuck off,
Yeah.
man.
I mean, that was the experience, right? It's like,
I mean, they probably do need a hug, by the way, but
yeah,
you know what I
yeah,
mean.
yeah. But we're not ready for it,
We're not ready for it. Yeah.
right? We're not ready for it. And so I just think, I think that for me, it was finding a path that just helped me like figure out all the different things, you know, like it wasn't just the transition from the army. It wasn't just, this. It was like the financial piece, the marriage piece, the all of these things. And that really helped me solidify a lot of who I am now. This will be 11 years. No, I got out 10 years ago in August. So I'll have been
Nice.
10 years out of off of active duty come August. And you know, like that's sort of the story that I've got, right? Is that's what I
Mm.
did.
Yeah, there are
Today,
a couple things I'd love to dig into there. Like,
yeah.
when you transitioned out of the army, you said a couple things that kind of stuck out at me.
Mhm.
There are these themes of like judgment of self. There's this kind of lack of purpose and identity, and then there's some self medication going on. So you mentioned like this idea of like judgment, like I'm poor now,
Oh
and like
yeah.
yeah, could you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, like candidly, when I was on active duty, I didn't worry about how much we were spending on stuff. Not that I'm not saying that active duty you make tons and tons of money, but as a captain with over 8 years time in service, it wasn't bad, right?
Yeah.
And then you've got, your deployment tax-free money that you've got like so it was this lifestyle where you were just used to not not worrying about, well, what does something cost, or like can we go out to, like, all these things, to transition to being out of the army,
Mhm.
having bought a house, having a partner that didn't have full-time employment. Now you're looking at your bank account going, oh my gosh, I need to
Uh-oh.
get paid
Yeah.
before I can go to the grocery store.
Yes.
But
Yeah, I feel
I've
that,
got
man.
this house, right? And so that was a real shock. Like, thinking back on it right now, I can't believe that there were moments and times when I had like a $20 bill in my pocket was more than I probably had in my checking account.
Yeah.
And I had a bachelor's degree at the time. I had a full-time job as a, mid-level manager in a international like, I shouldn't have been like that. And yet just that gap in income from active duty to, in 2014, you weren't coming off of active duty and getting a six-figure job right away.
Mhm.
Right? Like, and there wasn't even really a path to those in 2014 unless you were some hyper specialized IT nerd. I was an infantry officer,
Yeah.
right? So I'm like selling leadership,
Yeah, I
right?
got out in 2012, so I had a very similar experience, man. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah. So definitely it was definitely a hard transition with that.
Mm. Did you find yourself judging yourself against your peers that had maybe gotten out, like officers, like comparing yourself to what they were doing, or is that not really a thing for you?
So I didn't what's interesting is I really didn't know many people that had gotten out. Right? So I knew folks that had stayed, like, that had gone guard and were like active in the guard, or like full time in the guard, right? But in terms of officers that had gotten out, like there was a lieutenant that got out a little bit before me, but I wasn't like, I knew him, but I really didn't pay any attention to it. And none of my peers were getting out, right? Like today, I think of like dudes that I see as my peers. They're lieutenant colonels about to take battalion command. They've just been brigade S3s and brigade operations officers. They've been, I think one of my buddies was the aide to the force com commander about a year or two ago. Like like my buddies that I served with, especially in the 82nd, those cats are going to be general officers most likely someday. Like they didn't get out. So I did see myself looking at them and being like, man, I should have, like, fun
I
story.
fucked my entire life up.
Yeah. Oh, listen, my mentor in the army was a guy named Adam Barlow. He's a colonel now. I think he's at the Pentagon. Awesome guy. He commanded one of the airborne battalions in Alaska, like one of the Geronimo battalions.
Anchorage, probably, right?
I think so. I think so.
Yeah, I was at Wainwright.
Okay. Okay. So Adam is in battalion command, and my best friend from my time in the Army, who's now a major, probably about to be a lieutenant colonel. He had just come back from being like one of those scholars that went to Thailand to like learn Thai and do that. He had been at JRTC. He goes to Leavenworth, and he goes to be Adam's S3. Now we had all served together in the Red Devils, right? So Adam was the S3, Caleb was the HHC commander, and I was the Delta Company commander. And like the three of us were thick as thieves. And now I'm seeing things on social media and talking to them where they're working together now in Alaska, jumping out of planes together, like doing stuff that we all used to do
Mhm.
together. And I remember being like, oh my God, I would have been Adams S3 because I met him when he was the brigade planner. I was the deputy planner. And we were thick as thieves and went to Afghanistan together. Right. And he got me ready for command and all that stuff. And so, of course, the first thing I did was be like, I'd be his S3. This is such horseshit. Why couldn't I have done that? And that's probably the last time that I was like, man, I wish I hadn't gotten out.
Mm,
Was just that moment, right? Like, man, that would have been really cool to do together. Um,
yeah. So definitely some judgment, maybe some regret there. Another thing you mentioned was that you weren't really fulfilled or interested in your first job. And so what I see a lot of times is that typically that comes from a lack of really understanding your purpose and identity when you leave the military. So you might take the first thing that comes along and you're like, this totally doesn't align with me because you don't know what aligns with you. Is that kind of what happened? And if so, like how did you begin to find a job that was more in line with what you wanted to do?
so what's really funny about this? I think you're spot on, and it's like I think I went with what is the safest thing to transition my family off of active duty.
Mm,
And then that's when I realized, like, oh my God, I hate this. Right. And there's a funny realization that also happened is like, you know, as an infantry officer, everybody that works for you and around you, generally speaking, went to the same schools you did. Right. Like everybody went to the infantry officer basic. Like all my platoon leaders went to
yeah. You're
IOBC.
speaking the same language.
Yeah. And there's and you've got the same manuals. You've got, I don't know what it's called now, but when we were lieutenants, it was the FM 7-8, right? Company was 7-10. And that was your thing. And in that first job, I realized, like, oh my gosh, I'm here with an education level of this and know these things. And my team isn't there. We don't have a shared language. We don't have a shared understanding. I was
Mm.
managing hourly employees, right? That did a really tough job. Nothing against that, but their thought process was exponentially different
It's like
than
having a
me.
platoon or two of specialists.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Right. So what the specialists care about is exponentially different than what the commander cares about, right?
Yeah.
And so that was really hard. Okay. But it was all about, I hate to say, like, this sounds dramatic, but it's like first job was about survival. Can I
Mm.
feed my family, house my family? I had two kids at the time. Now I still have two kids, right? But my youngest was a year old when I got out, if that. And my oldest would have been, she was turning 5, right? So that's what I was getting out. Now they're 14 and 10, right?
Mm.
About to be 15 and 11. But it was all about, like, can I provide basic essentials? Nothing about am I being fulfilled? Go to grad school, start grad school, and I did a organizational leadership grad program. And that started to remind me of, like, what I did as a company commander, right? Like one of the books that we had to read was actually Simon Sinek's Leaders Eat Last. And I'm like
Oh, nice.
reading it and I'm like, yeah,
That's very
yes,
much an army thing.
this is
Yeah.
this is this is what we do. And then I was like, oh my God, I can't do that here. This sucks. So that's when I went to go find another job.
Mm.
And that second job I found some purpose because I got to build a team. The work we were doing wasn't taking care of pests. The work we were doing was restoring historic buildings or building more housing and fighting for affordable housing project. Like, so like there was a sense of purpose, you know, behind it. I worked with an architecture firm, right? And I knew nothing about it. I knew nothing about it, but as I met the owner and talked about what they did and saw it was like, oh, I can feel good about this kind of work. That's when I finished grad school and I loved what I was doing, loved the team, loved all that stuff. But the financial piece still wasn't there, right? Like, so it's like, and um, then I got an opportunity with a friend to go lead his company with him. And then through that whole process, I ended up going from being like an operations guy, like a COO, to turning into a business coach where I like today get to go in and just help companies be better at certain areas of their business, but it's like huge challenges, trying to help owners realize their full potential, all those different things. That's very similar to like trying to help platoon leaders figure out how to become company commander someday, how to help a platoon sergeant see how they need to interact with the lieutenant to actually do part of that platoon sergeant's job to develop and nurture that guy, even though he's a jerk and he needs to be brought to like I found that I could do that in the civilian world and really bring everything that I used to get to bring as an officer to life with other people. And so it took me 8 years, 7 years to get to that point where I was like super fulfilled in the work that I'm doing, super comfortable financially at this point. Like, could it be better? It could always be better. But it's like that judgment around where should I be and shouldn't I be is gone. And it took that time to get rid of it. But then, you know, and the fulfillment came, all those things came. It didn't happen overnight. I think that's the thing
Yeah.
that everybody's got to realize.
Yeah, I think that's something that a lot of people miss, and something I'm definitely going to put into the transition course is that like it took me 5 to 7 years myself, right? It took you 7 years. Yeah, it takes us sometimes a lot of repetition and continuous improvement. And okay, this didn't work, so I'm going to try something else. And I think that we probably need to be more aware of that when we get out. You know?
Yeah. Well, listen, I had a platoon leader of mine, and it was funny. I'm the company commander from Connecticut, and I get assigned a lieutenant that was from like 2 towns away from where I live now in Connecticut, right? So
Mm.
it's crazy. 2 Connecticut officers in one company in the 82nd is just not heard of, right? And he got out and he got out as lieutenant, and a lot of them take these medical sales jobs. And he called me one day and was like, I hate my life. I'm making crazy money, but I blah blah blah. So I was gonna hire him at my company, but he was interviewing sort of with me for a job that I was gonna maybe create and with this lobster company of all things, right? And he was gonna be
Yeah.
the assistant GM. And he used me as a reference. And I, was able to like tell them, like, hey, if you don't hire him, I'm going to. Well, the general manager quit right as they hired him. So he got to step in to his second job out of the army to be a general manager of this giant seafood operation. That dude went from being unfulfilled to being totally fulfilled like that. So he had that 1 year of suck to finding his thing, loving it, growing into I'm a longshoreman with this giant beard, like thing. And now he's married with a kid. Like he's living his best, like you can tell, like he found it and he found it quicker than say we did.
Yeah.
So it's doable, but it's like if he hadn't reached out and said something, he would have probably stayed to the golden handcuffs of some medical device sales, and his life would be drastically different.
Yeah, I think we need to have, and that's kind of a consciousness piece, within us. Like one of the wonderful things we get from meditation is this ability to check in with ourselves, like, okay, how am I feeling, and what does this say about my general life direction and what I'm doing? So I think he had a lot of awareness to say, I'm not happy with that, and began to look for other people or other situations, right? And I think that that's something we can definitely spread. Another thing that you mentioned was you were self-medicating with alcohol. Like a lot of like my friend Eric Kreitz, for example, did that, and over 20 years that led to a suicide attempt. So how much of that was a problem for you? And yeah, or was it a challenge? It looks like you kind of were aware of that and then stopped drinking before it became a challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it was likely more being an unhappy. So the financial piece, the unfulfilled piece, and then I don't want to disparage my former spouse at all. She's a lovely human being. We didn't have a good marriage, and so it was an outlet to get away from that as well. And it was never anything that got me in trouble, never got me dangerous. It was just Friday night I drink a case of beer and go to sleep, right?
Mm,
And not super healthy, right? Like it's just
gotcha.
like when it's every Friday and it's,
Or every night. That was more or less my
yeah,
case.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I wasn't an every nighter, but but I mean, listen, there were times when it was like a lot, right? Maybe it wasn't just Friday nights. It was couple bourbons each night to just go to bed or whatever that was. And I never thought that I had a problem, but what I came to realize was I'm just blacking out big chunks of my life because I didn't want to feel them.
Yeah.
And I didn't love not knowing all the things, right? Like losing that awareness.
That's very
And
much the
so
opposite of consciousness.
yeah, yeah. And so it came to a head as I was trying to really lean into mindfulness, but I would get drunk and be like, okay, time to meditate, and I would just fall asleep.
Mm,
And so it was like, well, let's see what this is going to be like. And the impetus for this was I was going to go on silent retreat for a week, and you can't drink on a silent retreat. And so I was like, okay, well, just stop drinking a month before it so you can see what it like. You just whatever. And I just haven't started again. And then you go to like, the funny thing is, I used to really like the taste of IPAs. Like that was the kind of beer that I like to drink. Well, now they make there's a non-alcoholic IPA that's delicious. Now, if you drink IPAs regularly, you might think that I'm crazy, but what I remember and what I'm drinking today are the same thing. So I can have what I'm that flavor, that sitting outside grilling with a beer that isn't alcohol, and I can be like that's just been for me, that has been a practice that has just helped me stay present. Um,
mm. I love that, man. Yeah, like
yeah,
I've also like pretty much entirely cut alcohol out myself. I'm curious so you're this big badass, like kick the door down 82nd infantry officer, right? When I talk to a lot of people or ask them about their experiences or they're talking to me, they usually preface it with something like, this might sound gay or this might sound fruity or whatever, but I started meditating. And they're almost like apologetic for it.
yeah.
Did you encounter some of those things coming up in you when you first heard about meditation?
I leaned into it pretty hard, right? So while I have all my military stuff in the background, right? I'm I don't love getting called out for being a former military guy. Like in all of the implications that come with, oh, you're a vet, so you must agree with X, Y, and Z. Like I don't want to talk politics here, but I'm not the stereotypical army officer that is right leaning. I grew up in New England. I'm not right leaning. So I didn't feel that way at all. I was like, I made it really known, actually. I was like, I started meditating. It's great. You should all do it. Like, I was the annoying gluten-free person, the annoying
I
vegan.
am also gluten free, but because I have a very serious gluten intolerance,
Right.
which is why I
But
can't
you
do
know what I'm
beer.
saying. Like the
Yeah,
person that doesn't really have the intolerance, but they're like showing off
it's the
like,
preaching, the preachy,
yeah,
like
yeah.
the
So
virtue
there was
signaling.
Yeah, so there was definitely some virtue signaling at the beginning. But what was funny is I shared it with a cousin of mine who's 16 years older than I am, right? So I'm 41, he's about to be 57. And he's a medical doc, like he's an eye doctor, like has own all this stuff. And him and his son both started meditating, but he would go into one of his appointment rooms when nobody was in the office. He'd close the door and he would sort of meditate in secret for those reasons of it's like weird. It's like what
Mm.
and I think that is I think it's being broken down more and more today. But there's
Yes.
definitely, I mean, it's just like talking about mental health, Scotty. Like
Mm.
when I shit, man, when I was a young lieutenant or even a young captain and PTSD was a thing, but like God forbid you went to the docs and told them that anything was wrong. It's just like as a paratrooper, I should have all this disability. It should all be documented every time I hit my head on the drop zone, every time, whatever. But you're an infantry officer in the 82nd Airborne Division. You shake it off. You don't go talk to the doc because you don't want to get a profile. You got to go lead the 5 mile run and smoke the dog shit out of everybody.
Hmm.
So you play with right like that was the mentality.
Yeah.
Even 2012, 2013,
Yep.
like so we got back from Afghanistan, and instead of like talking about things, our battalion did all of these adrenaline junkie things when we all got back. I don't know, good or bad, but we did all kinds of craziness to try to recreate all the adrenaline that we had just come off of from Afghanistan. Right?
Hmm.
That's how you deal with it. You keep, it was like,
Yeah, keep pushing forward through the objective, and like what you mentioned there from a physical standpoint of push it down, compartmentalize it. That also has a carryover into what you're dealing with mentally,
right.
and not only that, but I mean, like what 2011, like it was still illegal to be gay, right? You'd be kicked out of the army
Yeah,
for being gay.
yeah.
It's like, so like the military is quite slow oftentimes and really kind of updating these things. I remember I'm not sure if we talked about this our first call or not, but I was rear detachment XO for all the
Hmm.
people that couldn't deploy when I got injured. I froze off a toe and a half in Alaska, for those that don't know. And I was talking with a military family life consultant, a psychologist, for about 6 months. We would talk
Hmm.
2 or 3 hours a day. He was great. And then he ended up leaving because his duty position changed. And I went into the mental health department of the Army and said, "Hey, look, I've been talking to one of your psychologists for 6 months. I think it's great. I'm getting better as a person. Can I talk to someone?" And they said, "Well, we can't help you unless you're planning on killing yourself or somebody else." Right. So not only was there a stigma against it, but when you really actually tried to push forward and get some actual help,
Yeah,
um, it wasn't provided.
yeah. And I hope that it's getting better now. But so you didn't talk about it, right? Like you didn't. And um
Yeah, not to mention what effects that could have on secret and top secret security clearances.
right, right. And so there's all of these things that I don't think anybody's trying to, like I don't think they're trying to like harm anybody. But I don't think that we think about. I don't think that
Yeah,
I mean, I don't think that the United States has a firm grasp on what we should and shouldn't be doing for mental health in general anyway.
probably a pretty
Uh
good point.
right? Like um and so if we as a like just as a culture still struggle with it, to expect the military to be really good at it is probably grasping at straws still, you know?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I mean, that's why I'm building this community. Like it's become clear to me in my own healing journey that we can't really rely on anyone else to make us better people. We've got to step into our own boots and do it ourselves. And so I don't want to get irritated or angry or cast blame at anyone else, like the VA or the government or culture. I
Yeah,
don't care. Screw all that. The only way for me to lead and to is just provide an example of what healthy life looks like, and then bring other people like you that you can say, yeah, actually I was unhappy before and now I did this. And we have to start leading our own community ourselves. And so like what
yeah,
you're talking about with giving back, I mean, this is a great way to do it. Joining the community is a great way to do it. Like I'd eventually love to develop a meditation course or something with you where we
yeah,
can start showing people an example of, hey, here's an 80-second infantry officer that meditates, it's not gay, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Like it's actually quite normal.
Quite
And
normal. Yeah.
and and what's funny is that we will throw shade at meditating and yet have prayer lunches.
Yeah.
I
Yeah, and I'm
mean,
I'm definitely not against people. Look, if prayer lunches and spirituality and religion is, if that's the way you want to go, man, fucking knock
that's
yourself out.
great.
I'm so
Yeah.
happy for you.
So on this journey, right, I met this, oh God, what kind of Catholic priest are they? A Jesuit. Met a Jesuit
Okay,
priest.
so the Portuguese version.
Yeah, yeah, and I think they're like the ones that are like really like wisdom seekers in their own right, right? So like he's a professor at one of the schools
Well,
in
I
New
mean, they
York
have
City.
to at this point. They burned all the witches.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But so what's funny, he basically teaches a
Sorry for any
course.
Christians watching, by the way.
But so this guy teaches a course basically on mindfulness and meditation and like all the all the things that resonate with me. And so we had this conversation about my story, and he's like, yeah, people find faith or spirituality in these moments. And it was the funniest thing because I was raised Catholic. And so now I've got this Catholic priest sitting there telling me that he does all the same things
Mhm.
and that he has no idea what right looks like other than like know yourself, live into it, be good. But like it was this very interesting conversation with this guy.
That sounds cool
But
as hell, man. I'd love to meet him.
yeah, yeah, but it was just espousing everything that we're talking about from the lens of, hey, there might be Catholics or Christians that just pray, and their prayer could be the exact same thing as me sitting there following my breath,
Mm.
right? Or me thinking that the universe in some form or fashion is guiding me or whatever. I tend to call it the universe. When I'm with my kids, I call it the force because we like Star Wars. But
Same.
I'm not, you know, I was raised Catholic, but I'm not Catholic by any means.
I actually named Chewie after Chewbacca.
Nice. Nice. I love that. Yes. But like these are I think that we put the contemplative. I think that the biggest thing that I would say is if like having some sort of contemplative process that you can reflect and look inward, whether that's looking to what you would call God, what we would call the force, whatever.
Yep. Could be prayer, it could be meditation, it could be breath work. That's the thing. There's so much of a temptation to believe that the way that worked for us or our own cosmovision or way of seeing the world is the way that everyone else should see it. And I think that's where it becomes quite negative,
Yeah.
And so like I'm dividing up this podcast and like I talk with Christians, I talk with meditators, I talk with people that are just like spiritual hippies like me that believe in like Pachamama and like Mother Earth.
Yeah.
Everybody is welcome. The only thing that isn't welcome is saying that this is the only way.
Yeah. Because listen, I've stumbled and changed paths and like I mean, I remember coming back from Afghanistan, I had gotten super Catholic in Afghanistan. Like of
Hmm.
all things, right? Like my
A
mentor.
bit of a Pascal's wager, maybe.
I mean, listen, it was super religious boss, and I wasn't gonna like so I just started reading Catholic stuff. Because it's
Hmm.
like part of my heritage, right? Like I'm very
Yeah.
French, right? Like I'm very French Canadian. My whole family's from Quebec, like very, very rooted in Catholicism, all that stuff. So it was really interesting. And it helped me on my tour in Afghanistan,
Hmm.
right? And then it didn't. And so it changed and it morphed and it turned into whatever it is now. And I think that everybody goes through that. Um, I think the biggest thing that I wish that I had had that I didn't have was somebody that had gone through it ahead of me. Right. So like I think I was able to help that former platoon leader because he knew that he could reach out to me.
Yep.
When I got out, I didn't really know anybody that had successfully left. But I got stupidly lucky that, my former father-in-law was a retired naval officer. He knew some people. And so like I got surrounded by civilians that were helpful. But I think something that as people are transitioning out, it's like you likely do know somebody that's effectively transitioned into the world. They totally My experience is they totally will have a conversation with you. Right.
100%.
Right. I've had some bosses, some folks that were XOs, S3s when I was in command that got out. And instead of waiting for them, I've just like chatted them on LinkedIn. I'm like, hey, sir, you want to get together and have a chat? Just because I wanted to connect in, right? Like,
Yeah.
there's
Even
these,
people you don't know, like that's how you and I originally connected.
oh,
My general view is like experience is about 80% of people that I don't even know, just because of our military heritage background, will say, yes, I'll have a conversation with you.
yeah,
Like it's as simple as that. So like if somebody is looking for someone to talk out, or reach out to, LinkedIn is a great way to do that. Also, this is again why I'm building Waking Warrior. As we start to share our stories, this is going to provide more and more examples of people that have transitioned. And so it's like I'm really going to narrow it down into flavors, right? Okay, I'm transitioning and I'm like super Catholic. Hey, I got a guy that you can talk to. I'm
yeah,
transitioning and I'm interested in meditation or whatever it is,
yeah,
And so I think that this is part of how we get back, which is sharing our stories and connecting people in the form of a community where they feel more comfortable reaching out for help because they see examples of others doing the same, leading by example.
yeah, totally. I totally agree. I totally think it's great. And I would say that there are those folks that never served that want to help you also, right? And
Also, yes.
so I always used to say, like, when I was struggling to find like the right profession or right career, whatever you want to call it, I was like, I just need to find somebody that's willing to take a risk. I just need to find somebody who's willing to take a risk. And then I did. And that risk has turned into a great career, another business that I'm now a partner in with. So like these things all come together. And so the idea, it's like as vets, if we're really motivated to find the right thing and to work hard and to continue to lead, people are looking for us.
Yes.
And as
And
long as,
especially if we actually take action. My
yeah,
my first job, as I mentioned, was boring as hell. I was also a functional or not so functional alcoholic, so
right.
I lost it primarily for that reason. I spent 6 months looking for jobs and sending out resumes out the wazoo, and I finally just said, okay, let's get real. Like, what resources do I have, and how can I use them? And one of the resources I had, I'm a West Point graduate, so I was like, why don't I just go to the West Point graduate meeting? And I did that. Met a guy. He introduced me to the owner of a company, and the next week I had a job after like I couldn't pay my rent at that point,
Right.
and just 1 week, and it was one of the funnest jobs I've ever had.
Yeah. And so it's so there is some, I think there is some self ownership or some self proactive, like you have to
Yeah,
be proactive, like transitioning out for whatever reason you're transitioning out is going to be tough. People are there to help, but you have to seek it, you have to try. And
yeah,
hopefully, like our stories of like, hey, I self-medicated with booze because I was judging myself for not making enough money. I was unhappy. Blah, 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 blah. Like that doesn't have to be
yes,
the captain that's getting out right now, the lieutenant that's getting out, the sergeant that's getting, like, there's so much that you can do based on what you've done. And I'm
100%.
telling you, there's plenty of crazy business owners out there that literally, like, I coach them all. They will hire a lieutenant for a sales position for something they know nothing about because they know that if they get the right vet, that they're going to work so hard to learn the thing and then become their best employee. Like, I know this to be very fundamentally true because they all
Also
want
agreed.
to go, like, the workforce is yearning for people that know how to get shit done.
Yeah,
And so it's like if you're listening to this and you're one of those vets that's like in a shitty job right now that you hate, call me, right? Like hit me up because there is a company that I'm probably working with that would hire you like that if you're proactive, if you take initiative, if you want to go get after it, right?
Dude, I absolutely agree so much. I think people need to hear that. It's like so many different ways that we can get derailed or more accurately derail ourselves along this journey. You either go into the super, I'm going to do this myself, and then you do it without community and you feel alone and you isolate yourself. That's not a great way to do it. Or you avoid. And like, I think the root cause, like self medication with alcohol or any other, even marijuana, like whatever you're
Mhm.
using to self medicate, this process of like becoming unconscious and forgetting about your problems is really at the end of the day, in my view, nothing more than just trying to avoid the decisions that you need to make about your life and not taking responsibility for it. It's
Yeah,
a hard thing to do, to be conscious. It's a hard thing to do, to look yourself in the mirror and say, look, no one's going to improve my life except me. And so what am I doing in my life that's not great? I'm going to stop that. And what do I need to do in my life to move forward in a positive direction? That's a hard thing to do, especially over time, but it doesn't have to be done alone.
right. And I think that's why I love that's why I'm happy to do this and hopefully do it again sometime. But it's the
Hell
idea
yeah.
of like, you know, it doesn't have to suck. Like that's
It
probably the
doesn't have to
simplest way.
suck.
It doesn't have to suck,
It's so great. Yes.
right?
It's,
Like you
it's
can
like this
effectively,
military meme.
yeah, yeah,
There was a guy that came into the doctor in one of these memes, and he's like, "So the doctor's like, what pain are you feeling?" It's like, "Oh, the normal amount." The doctor's like, "What the hell, man? The normal amount is zero."
right,
Like I believe it's our fundamental birthright as humans to be healthy, to be happy, to live in abundance, to be aligned with our purpose. And that's not saying that it's easy to get there, and it's not all roses and rainbows when you get there either. Like this life still sucks sometimes. But what I've gained, and what I think you've probably gained, is after we do this healing work on ourselves, I feel happy and joyful and content in everything that goes on. Like, yes, this thing about my life might suck, but I know it's not going to be permanent, and the overall direction of my life is something that I'm so grateful to be experiencing on a day-to-day basis. And most people have no fucking idea what that feels like, and
yeah,
that's a real
and
shame.
right. So it's possible to break out of that though.
Hell yeah, man. I love it, dude. Any final thoughts or notes or advice to anyone that's watching this that might resonate with your story?
I mean, I just think first and foremost is, don't hesitate to reach out, right? Like, whether it's my LinkedIn or you got my email, Scottie, like totally happy to talk to anybody that wants to talk. Um, and I think that the bigger thing is just be true to yourself. Like there were so many days, months, years where I was like, everything's fine, everything's great. Or like you said, that meme, like I've got the normal amount of pain. Like because we're told as military officers or service folks to like suck it up, drive on. That might be true when you've got to walk 10 more miles back or when you've got to go do this air assault. You got to go do this airborne operation. But it is not a way to live your life.
Correct. This goes down to
Like,
like stress and like the way like fight or flight, right? So recognize the situation that you're in. Am I in front of a bear right now? Do I have to stop everything that I'm doing and run away? But if
yeah,
you live your life like that, that is a very not great thing to do. So it's like situational awareness of what do I need to be exhibiting right now? Is it okay to talk about my feelings? And if you're not running away from a bear, the answer is probably yes.
correct. And so that would be the final thing is like if it doesn't feel good and feel right, you're probably onto something.
Hmm.
And there is you will feel 1,000 times better if you go talk to somebody. For me, it started with the meditation coach. It led to talking to a therapist every 3 weeks, right? Like, I probably don't need to, but holy smokes, having somebody that's going to sit there and not judge me as I talk about all the things going on in my life, pretty great.
Agreed, man. I
Highly
love it.
recommend. So,
And what sort of people would you like to work with in what you do now? And yes, if
yeah,
you could frame kind of like the people that would you'd like to reach out to you for business or further work opportunities.
yeah. So, listen, I coach companies on sales, marketing, communication. So if you're trying to go down the path of becoming a really great sales professional, or like a marketer, or even a leader in an organization, those are the types of folks I totally want to talk to because I've done those things. And my company, the Question First Group, works with people to do that. Um, I also work with a company called Impact that teaches, they ask you answers to sales and marketing framework. But really, I'm not looking to, I'm looking to just help some folks. And so
Awesome, man.
we've got a course at the Question First Group that talks about communication. That'll help you sell. It'll help you connect with people, help you lead. And I'm happy to offer that to folks to test out. And if you end up becoming the head of sales at insert billion-dollar company, and you want to bring that to them, like, happy to chat about that. But it's more about how can I set up some folks to go get the success that they all deserve.
Awesome, man. I love it, dude. Chris, thanks, man. I'll after we end the recording, we can hang on for post show notes or what have you. But I really
Sure.
appreciate your time, your story, your vulnerability and expressing. And I think that you're doing a really great job of being a leader in the sense that it's opening space for other people to seek the help that they need. So thank you for your story, man. Can't wait to have this published. I'll also put in the show notes in the course through Waking Warrior how to contact you and all that good stuff.
Awesome. Appreciate it.
Awesome, man.
Thanks, Scottie.
All right, let me kill the recording, and then we'll have a wrap for
Yeah.
number 9.